Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Sugar Mama's Fireplay, the podcast that ignites your financial journey with inspiring stories and innovative strategies. I am your host, financial planner Canna Campbell. Now, today we have I guess you could say financial fraud, financial abuse, financial disaster. If I say this with so much compassion to what you've gone through, we are joined today with Tracy Hall. Now, I actually interviewed Tracy Hall 4 years ago on my YouTube channel, and she shared her story about a serial con man who swindled more than $70 million out of innocent, everyday people. Among those people included herself, who was actually in a relationship with him at the time using a fake name of Max Tavita. Now, if this is sounding very familiar apart from my YouTube channel, you may have actually listened to the podcast series, Who the Hell is Hamish? Well, Tracy Hall has just published her first book about this experience, and it's called The Last Victim. And she is here with us this morning to share her story, her insights, and her important message for every single person to protect themselves from this happening to them. Tracy, thank you so much for coming in today. Can you please share with us your experience with, I guess the true name we'll call him, Hamish McLaren, and how you became victim to his scheme?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. I first met a man on a dating app in 2016, a man called Max Tavita. I swiped right and we dated for nearly 18 months. And it wasn't until he was arrested in 2017 that I found out his true identity. He told me he was a chief financial officer for a family office, and we spent, 18 months together in a serious relationship, taking holidays, spending weekends, going for dinners, all the things you do in a kind of a mid-40s relationship. And I woke up to some video footage of him being arrested outside of his apartment in Sydney.
And this was on the news, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a Crime Stoppers video. It was just an online news article. And I, obviously got in contact with the police, and they said, yeah, his name is not Max. His name is Hamish McLaren, and he's one of Australia's most notorious conmen.
I have goosebumps like running through my body, even though I know this story so well and, from 4 years ago. I still shakes me up listening to it. So I can only imagine what you're going through. Can we go to the red flags? Did ever something think, oh, hang on, that doesn't sound right or feel right? Was there ever something in your gut that hang on, doesn't stack up correctly?
At the time, no. I mean, he was quirky. He had quirks for sure, but
who doesn't?
Who doesn't have quirks? We're all a bit weird, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a great quote in my book which says, we can only connect the dots in reverse. And it's not until we look backwards that we start to go, oh, yeah, that was a bit weird, or that's
so
a red
true.
flag.
That is so true. Yeah, the dots. Yeah,
connecting the dots in reverse, and hindsight's such a beautiful thing. And
Harry Hindsight never made a bad decision in his life.
And I think the other thing too is, when you're in a relationship and you're in love, and you're wearing your rose-colored glasses, all the red flags are just flags.
Yeah.
And I do explore that a lot in detail in my book, is going through the stories and the detail of how he kind of weaseled his way into my life very deeply, but taking a moment within the book to kind of pull out the red flags, which I could only see in retrospect.
Weasel is the perfect term. He really is an absolute toxic parasite.
Yeah.
When we go back to how he gained your trust initially, were there any, swami tactics that he used now that you've got, the benefit of hindsight now, to help, I guess, solidify your trust even further?
I think the thing to say about Hamish is that he was a professional. So he has never had a job other than being a con man. He's done this for decades, so he's very, very good at what he does. I think in retrospect, what I know about him is that he spent a lot of time with me and doing things to gain my trust. So he listened. He was a phenomenal listener. So all he had to do was listen to what I say. And repeat or actually create that within himself and represent back to me for me to fall in love with him. So he was fantastic at mirroring. And most of us as humans have a similarity bias, which means if you look like me, if you sound like me, if you like the same things as me, if your values are the same, I'm going to naturally trust and love you because, it's a
Wow.
reflection of yourself, really. And so that's what he did. He presented himself in a way mirrored back to me, knowing that if he just did the things that I wanted or that I said I wanted in my life, that I would fall in love with him. And 100% I did, and I trusted him. And so they were a couple of the tactics he used. He was very slow in his approach, It wasn't like he knocked on my door one day and, said, give me all your money, pulled a fast one and left. This was an 18-month relationship.
Well, this is like any form of abuse. It just doesn't suddenly start happening. It's, a push here, a shove there, a pinch, or, saying something that's a bit mean and nasty and it
Yeah.
getting increasingly aggressive and psychologically damaging. It deepens over time, but to the point where you've lost yourself completely and can't actually even identify exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
Can we go back to the moment where you realized that you were actually a victim yourself, not just, relationship wise, but also financially? What was running through your mind at the time?
I think when I first saw the video of him being arrested and knowing it was him, knowing it was my boyfriend being arrested, the first feeling was disbelief because this was a man I loved that, we were building a future together and I was watching him being arrested with, a headline of him swindling people out of money. And I thought there must be a mistake. And it wasn't until I spoke to the head detective, Tom Zadrovic, that, I realized very quickly what I was dealing with and I was a victim and I needed to spend some time with the police to unravel the previous 18 months of my life. I felt, I felt physically ill. I felt so betrayed. I, I was in disbelief that something like this could happen to me. And I think we all think that, you see these stories on the news and, on a current affairs shows and things like that. And you think, oh, that would never happen to me. I'm better than that. I'm smarter. I'm well educated. I've traveled the world. I've got a great intuition. And yet here I am. I lost my life savings to a con man. So disbelief, betrayal, deep, deep betrayal. And then I think it just went into sadness, depression, and then having to realize that I had to rebuild my life.
The grief, processing of the grief.
You're right. There's a lot of grief because I thought that I'd met my match.
Yeah.
I was building a relationship with this man and I believed that he had the best, my best interests at heart. And so I was grieving a relationship, but that grief had hit me very, very quickly. It was like a death of a person because, in fact, Max Tavita never existed. So within it took me 18 months to fall in love with him, but 24 hours and I had to fall out of love with him very, very quickly. So that was hard. And then I went into the very pragmatic and rational exercise of untangling the financial situation I found myself in, dealing with the ATO, dealing with a non-compliant superannuation fund, which he had convinced me to set up, a self-managed super fund, and that's where most of my money went, dealing with a potential dodgy tax return that he had helped me with. There was so much to untangle and at the same time, making a police statement and at the same time being a single mom and working a really huge job and trying not to lose my job at the same time as it was the only income I had.
Wow. There is so much to deal with. You've got to be using your brain's got to be switched on and sharp, going through the intricacies of fixing tax returns, dealing with the ATO, obviously filing very detailed reports with the police and working with them and helping them as much as you can, plus the emotional vulnerability in going through all of that and the complicated grief and all the emotions that come with that, and also the twists and turns. You think you're through something and then something will happen and then you're back again. Like it's not like we just gradually move through grief. We can very easily be triggered back again. I can't even imagine like what you've gone through, but how much did you lose financially?
In total, I lost $317,000, which was my entire career superannuation and some savings and then some shares that I'd vested through my, through my career in tech marketing.
How have you rebuilt yourself emotionally from here and financially? I guess there's two questions there. Sorry, I'm loading you up.
Yeah.
Let's go with the emotional side first. Like, how have you moved from this? Like,
Yeah, so I'm not going to lie, it was really hard. It's 7 years now, so one of the beautiful things about life is time does heal all wounds, I think,
Mm.
and sometimes it just takes time to look back on a situation with perspective and grace, and but the first few years kind of were so hard. In sort of one part of my brain, I had this really huge job and I couldn't lose it. So going to work every day and working 14, 16-hour days was such a blessing
Oh, I'm
because
like, how did you do that? And you're like, it was a
it,
blessing. I'm like, oh my God.
it was a
To
blessing
concentrate
because
at work though with that in your head, I guess it was escaping.
it was escaping, it was compartmentalizing. When I was at work, I was running a big team. I was, delivering campaigns. I was delivering my KPIs. It was busy and it was full on. So I didn't have a lot of time to sit and navel gaze and really be concerned about what was happening because I was just so scared of losing my job, to be honest, because I just had to keep performing. So that was a blessing. I have a beautiful daughter who, was quite young at the time, 6.5, 7 years old. And I made a decision very early on that there would be no tears at the dinner table. So we didn't discuss this at home. I didn't want to worry her. I knew that I had to keep going. And, having someone else in your life that's bigger than you, that needs you, helps you get out of bed every day. So I'm so blessed that I had her. I had to make her lunch every day, get her to school, get her to activities. So that was another thing that was really helpful. And then I would just cry at nighttime, basically.
Oh,
And I got a lot of therapy and I pulled my world in quite small. I didn't
yeah.
trust anybody. There weren't many people that knew what had happened very early on because I think it was just so overwhelming for me. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I couldn't believe that this had happened to me. I didn't know if I was going to get my money back. I didn't know what was going to happen. No one would talk to me about who Hamish really was. And so I pulled my world in pretty small, got a lot of therapy. I ended up on antidepressants
Awesome.
on the advice of my psychologist and my GP because, crying for a few days or a few weeks is okay.
Mm.
But I had been crying every day for 4 months. And someone had to say to me, that's not okay. That's
Yeah.
not normal. It's not sustainable. So that was something I did do for a period of time
Yeah.
that helped me out of that.
Mm.
I love exercising. That's such a solace for me. They were just the basic things. I concentrated on my sleep because I knew that without sleep, I'm not a very great human.
Sleep is a form of medicine.
It is. And so, like, some people self care and journal for 3 hours in the morning and do yoga and have their beautiful cacao ceremonies, which I don't have the luxury of doing because I'm a single mum and working full time. But for me, my self care was going to bed early and saying no to the invitation or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. So I think there was a bunch of things that I did to get through emotionally. And then just with time and with support and with the right structures around me, I've just, I've built myself up. And then, of course, doing the podcast with the Australian and Greg Bearup was an incredibly healing journey
Mm.
for me because I found out all the things I needed to know to put the puzzle together in my mind in the correct way that helped me cope with what had actually happened.
Wow. I mean,
Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, it was, but it is full of so many nuggets of gold and so much wonderful advice. Whether you're going through just a simple breakup or whether you're going through a financial loss or, or any type of loss, I think there's so much in that. And, I can relate to a lot of you're saying about, needing to get professional help, needing to get on medication, needing to go to bed early, prioritizing sleep.
Mm.
And bringing your circle in tight, really retreating and keeping the people who are important to you close to you because they're a form of oxygen to help keep you going. Can we move on to the financial part of your journey? I mean, it's a lot of money to lose. I mean, that's a significant percentage, I imagine, of your wealth.
It was everything, Hannah.
God.
Like, let's call it 100%.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
How have you recovered? I mean, we're 7 years on now. Like, how have you managed to find the energy to get back on your feet again? What have you done and what has helped the most in your recovery? And have you got any of this money back?
None of the money has come back. None of the victims have received any money back, according to the police in the case and the investigation that was done. There is no money anywhere. So that's that. And I guess accepting that and focusing my energy on myself and my own financial recovery has been key for me. So very early on, I went and found a financial advisor. And that was such a hard thing for me to do, to trust someone else
Yeah, I bet.
with money. And it, I guess it's not lost on me that I had a really good job. And I've always worked, and
You're a hard worker, I know
I'm a really
personally.
hard
Yeah.
worker. And I love work. I love what I do. And but for me, holding on to a job, even through pregnancy and babies and all of that stuff, is just so important for me, because it allowed me, even with the financial flatten that I experienced after Hamish, it gave me choices. And choices are important for everyone, but they're especially important for women, I think.
Mm.
And so I had a job, and what I did was I was recommended 3 financial advisors. I researched all of them. I met all 3 of them. I did reference checks on all of them. I went deep.
Good on you.
I went deep, can I?
So you should. I mean, I think everyone should be doing
Yeah, I looked
their
up the
research
ASIC
on a financial
register,
planner. Yep.
made sure they had their AFSL, Australian Financial Services license, what they were able to advise me
Mm.
on. I did all the things that I should have done previously with Hamish. And I met the most wonderful woman, and she sat with me and she asked me all the right questions. She was so compassionate. She was so empathetic. And I just cried a lot. And she said, "You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
We're going to put a plan in place. It's not a secret that you're not going to retire with as much superannuation and wealth as you thought you would, based on losing your 20-year career savings. But we're going to do some other things. And if you follow the plan, you're going to be fine." I'm very disciplined. So I did what she said. I put 100% of my trust into her.
Mm.
And she's still my financial planner today. We still work on strategies to build my wealth, manage my budget, manage my life. And that's been a wonderful support for me. I have a pretty contained life. I spend my money on experiences and travel. I don't, I don't live in a big place. I have a fully paid off car. I don't have any debt other than my, where I live. And, so things are pretty simple for
Mm.
me. And I love to travel, and that's what I try and do. So everything's planned, everything's disciplined. And over time, it's, I have got back on my feet, and I have found the ways to, have an incredible life. And yeah, I'm so grateful for that.
Knowing you personally, and we have a few mutual friends, I have no doubt you will make back that money, because you're such a hard worker. You see great opportunities and you're incredibly intelligent. So I feel like you've got a great financial planner behind you, and she's going to get you the best place she can.
Yeah.
But I don't underestimate what you can actually do to leapfrog and exceed your expectations. So definitely have
I'm
faith in
manifesting
yourself.
that for myself.
Good. That's what I like to hear. And miracles happen as well.
Yeah.
Are you in contact with any of the victims still? Because there's a long list of victims.
There's a long list of victims. I met the majority of them through the case in Australia. So the case that where he was prosecuted in Australia, 15 victims, $7.66 million. But we do know globally it's closer to 70, 80, $100 million.
Oh, my God.
I did meet a lot of the victims through that process, and also through the podcast, Who the Hell is Hamish? So that was an incredible opportunity for healing, I think, for all of us, because when you meet other people and you realize that you're not alone in any situation in life that has flattened you, that is a blessing, because, feeling alone in that grief and that shame was horrible. And then when I met some of the other victims and became friends with them, shared stories, and heard really the extent of his criminal past, that made me feel, I don't know, it just gave me a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am still in contact with a bunch of them. They're all at different stages in their journeys, and that's what it is. Yeah.
Now, you've just written your first book. I want to hear about what inspired you to actually write this book after everything you've gone through.
Yeah, so the inspiration behind the book came, I've done a lot of talking about what happened with Hamish, and through the podcast, through media interviews, and what I've realized is that it's very hard to explain the insidious nature of intimate fraud in a 2-minute interview. or in fact, even a 20-minute podcast.
Yeah.
There's so much that happens, and there's so much detail, and there's so much coercion that happened in the relationship that I needed 75,000 words to explain that. And the other thing about the book is it's broken into three parts. So there's before, during, and after Hamish. So a lot of people know what happened during the Hamish era.
Yeah.
That's been well recorded. But what I really wanted to explain was my life before I met Hamish, and a whole bunch of things that happened to me in my life before Hamish, which I believe set me up in a way that gave me a level of resilience to weather the storm when Hamish hit. So I go into detail about that. So my father died when I was young, when I was about 26, of leukemia very suddenly. My mum got breast cancer. My marriage broke down. My best friend's husband died. I had a miscarriage. There was a
Oh my
lot,
gosh.
a lot has happened.
Yeah.
A lot has happened before I even came across Hamish in my 40s. And then I also wanted to show that no matter what happened, you don't have to be financially flattened by a con man to go through a really tough time.
Yeah.
And I wanted to show that rebuilding a life is possible, and there is hope. And with time and the right support structures and the right mindset and things like that, that you can, life can be great afterwards. And I think, grief and sadness can also coexist with joy and empowerment and things like that. And I wanted to explain that because after the podcast, the story went away.
Mm.
And a lot of people say, well, then what happened? And did you get the money back? And how did you rebuild? And there's a lot of those questions. So I wanted to explain in detail the full story that couldn't be grabbed in a 2-minute interview with a salacious headline like,
Yeah.
vulnerable divorcee falls victim to a love rat. Like all the clickbaity stuff
Yeah.
that's out there, which makes for interesting, story. But
It's only touching the surface of what really has gone on. It doesn't put it into
educate.
context.
Yeah, and it doesn't educate. And you hear those stories, and like we were saying at the beginning, you hear those headline and clickbaity things, and you go, that's not me. That would never happen to me. But you read a story with more detail, and it helps educate people that it really can happen to anyone.
Did you find that as you were writing, it was healing your heart?
Yeah, in a way. The stuff about Hamish, I feel so fine with now. I've done a lot of media. There's been a lot of talk about it, the podcast, of course. I think the parts that were the most healing and the most cathartic were talking about all of the things that happened in my life before Hamish even came on the scene, which I probably, if I'm really honest, haven't done as much work on personally. And so to go through those were really sort of deep emotional reflections, and going through my journals of when I lived in India, and really delving deep into that time in my life when I was experiencing grief of a different kind. And then at the other end of the book, really reflecting on just how far I've come, and feeling really proud of the journey that I've been on, and actually really having to think about what were the things that I did, because I think when you're in it, you're just getting through each day.
Oh, it's survival.
It's survival. It's every moment. It's every day. It's like getting out of bed and making a cup of tea. Okay, I've done that. Now I've got to pack the lunches, do that, get on the bus and go to work. It is literally moment by moment. But then looking back, I think, oh, wow, I made it. I made it through. I'm okay. Like life is okay.
When you were going through the writing stage, did you discover new things about him? Were there any more like dirty surprises? Or did you had everything?
I think a lot of it had already been discovered through the court process. I mean, I think the thing is, nothing surprises me about the story or Hamish, or, the extent of his lies, the people he has, taken money from. It does feel like, at the time it felt like every other day something new was coming up. In writing the book 7 years on, every now and again a piece of information pops up that I think, oh, wow, okay. Or someone will reach out to me and say, oh, I went to school with him, or, but to be honest, the stories are all the same. They're just lies and fanciful incarnations of what never happened. So,
Wow. What would you say was the most challenging part then when it came to sitting down and writing this book? What was the hardest, I guess, block or part to sort of push through or grow through? Probably a better way of
yeah,
saying.
I think it was earlier on in my life, to be honest, talking about the death of my father and how my parents' marriage, they were married for 32 years when dad died, and watching my
Oh,
mum have to deal with that, that was, and that process, at the time, I was really young, I was 26, 27. I was working for a hedge fund, and I went back to work really quickly. And I think back then, mental health and the conversation around these things wasn't as open. I just got back into work and just started putting my head down and my bum up and
yeah. Trying to push
just
through.
push through and get on with life. And I don't think, and I think this is true for a lot of Western cultures, is that we're not taught how to grieve.
Yeah, that's so true.
And how do you know how to grieve when you don't see it around you? You just sort of, it's a bit like the stiff upper lip, and we just keep going, we just push on. And
Which I hate.
I know, but you're at work and it's not okay just to burst into tears and have a meltdown when you've got to deliver a campaign or something,
Yeah.
So I used to walk around the city back in those days, and I just have tears streaming down my face, and I'd have my sunglasses on, and I'd think, where do all the people who are grieving go during the day? Why aren't there grieving rooms? Why aren't there places you can go? And I didn't have a therapist at that time, probably couldn't afford it. I was a lot younger. I didn't really understand the need to piece everything together and really support myself in that way. So going back to that time and thinking about how I dealt with that, and well, how I didn't deal with it,
Mm.
and how those emotions just, they catch up with you at some point. And I think this was the moment where they caught up with me. So writing those chapters and then rereading them, and, I couldn't, there are some chapters in the book that I can't read without crying, because it brings back so many memories. So for me, that was the hardest thing. But what it does, I think, is provide readers with a real insight into who I am as a person and what I've been through and why I was able to weather the storm. I think having a co-author as well is an incredible privilege. Summerland, who wrote the book with me, there's this beautiful saying is that you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. And she saw things in me and things that I'd been through that I probably would have just brushed over and said, they're not that important, whatever. And she'd go, hang on, talk me through that. How were you feeling? What was happening? And next minute would be a chapter,
Wow.
and an incredible chapter. And I think that was a really surprising part of writing the book as well.
Do you feel a sense of closure now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, this experience will be a part of me for the rest of my life. It's not something you just get over. It's not something you leave behind. It's a part of me. For me, it's been really interesting that this has fueled something inside me that is making me come and talk to people like you. Like, I want everyone to be fully aware and educated on these things. And what I'd say is, you don't have to be swindled by a con man to be financially vulnerable.
Mm.
You can have a serious illness, you can be financially vulnerable through divorce or death. And what this has shown me is that we have to take a lot more agency over our finances, especially as women, because it's our future, it's our security, it gives us choices. And there is closure in the sense of, this happened and we're moving on and we're rebuilding and we've got a good life now. But a real sort of fuel to continue talking about it, to educate people and help people be more financially resilient, I suppose.
What are you hoping that the readers will gain from reading your story?
I'm hoping that they will, really understand that this can happen to anyone. I'm hoping that they can see some of the signs that I didn't see, and if not in their own lives, in people close to them, because sometimes the people close to you can see what's happening that you can't. So opening up a conversation around that. And I think regardless of financial trauma or any type of thing that someone goes through, I really want people to feel like there's hope, like there is a life after, and it can be great life after. And I'm hoping that I can just act as that beacon of hope for anyone going through a challenging time.
Absolutely. Now, Hamish, I was about to call him Max, is going to be released in less than 2 years.
About 2 years, yeah, 2026.
How do you feel about that? And if you were to see him, what would you say to him?
I feel like no sentence would have been long enough to, take away the pain that he's caused so many people, but the law is the law. So he'll be released potentially on parole in July 2026. Like, if I'm really honest, I try not to give it too much thought.
Mm.
I want to spend my energy on me and making
Yeah.
my life better. And, he's served a sentence. We hope that, there's some lessons being learned. But again, I really try and focus on me and what my life is going to look like moving forward. And I feel like that's the best use of my energy.
I completely agree. Well, your book, The Last Victim, when does it hit the bookshelves?
It's hit the bookshelves on the 1st of May, and it's available in all good bookstores, online. There's an audio version, and yeah.
Well, I cannot wait to start reading your book, and I think this is so important for everyone. People go to a self-protection mode where they think, oh, that wouldn't happen to me, but that's the way that they think until it actually happens to them. And it is so important to be aware of all the signs, the warnings, listen to your gut. As you said, having those open conversations with people that you know and trust about what's going on so that they can potentially shed some light and or give you a different opinion or even give you a resource to go and check someone out, like on the ASIC register and, checking their license details and asking additional questions and gauging someone's feedback or their answers when they're asked these probing questions, which is so incredibly important.
I do have a resource list on my website if people want to go there and download it, and it's a whole bunch of kind of ideas and websites to go to just double check everything if you're unsure. So there's some really good ideas in there, so you don't have to do the research yourself.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much. And I really hope everyone takes some time to go and read your book and take in this wise wisdom and share the wisdom as well with other people through these conversations so that we can create a strong awareness and knowledge around these, I guess, creatures and characters and parasites, let's say, so that we protect ourselves and that this does not ever happen again.
Yep.
All right. Well, look, thank you so much. Last Victim is on the bookshelves shortly. And if you need any details from Tracy, please head to her website for those free resources. Tracy, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Canna. Thank you.
Now, thank you everyone for listening to Sugar Mama's Fireplay. Until next Monday morning, stay motivated, empowered, and never stop seeking new ways to achieve, or in Tracy's case, catch up on her and your financial goals and dreams. This is Sugar Mama's Fireplay.